Hello there. You are someone and I am someone else, and today I'm going to be talking about immigration. I am extremely pro-immigrant. I'm going to explain it. I'm going to do the best I can to explain why I like immigrants, why I believe immigrants actually produce flexible labor markets in most countries. They especially promote immigration. Okay, so I'm going to explain to you why I like immigration. Okay, have you ever heard of North Korea? Have you ever heard of China? Ever heard why those places suck and why they don't have, they control information and control people coming in out of their country? And it's very hard to trade with North Korea. I don't know about China, but China, it seems pretty easy to put capital in the country, but there's all these caveats to it because you're not owning a stock, you're not owning a service revenue certificate, but whatever. It's not really a stock you're buying. When you're buying Alibaba, nobody cares. Okay, whatever, right? With immigration, it's kind of like investment. You want it to be as flexible as possible for the most part. I mean, yes, if you're clearly scamming someone, then yes, you should be put on trial. But immigration, I see no negative downsides to it really, because for every immigrant that we come in, we free up 20% of the labor force for better jobs. Like, and the higher, I don't know, immigration. It's pretty much proven at this point that immigration is tremendously good for a country. The United States is built by immigrants, built by people who suffered and endured just to get here. My ancestors came on ships. They probably had these little husky dogs, right? They were breathing in the cold air. It's kind of an interesting image to put in your head, right? They suffered, these husky dogs and their people, right? Yeah, and the dogs are the only ones that go to heaven because who cares about people? But that being said, right, despite the fact that the husky dogs are the only ones that go to heaven, because dogs are the only ones, they're the only beings that, in my opinion, that are worthy of the lights of heaven. Oh man, people suck. But anyway, that's besides the point. Even though people suck, I believe we should have as much expansionary labor as possible. See, while I disagree with the labor theory value, it is very, very important that we open up immigration. Because it frees up capital, it frees up resources to do other things. North Korea has not learned that lesson. That's the reason why North Korea sucks. It sucks ass to live in North Korea. I wouldn't want to live in North Korea. I would rather live in South Korea. They freed up most of their capital, and their land's pretty usable. They've optimized their land for their capital, really. South Korea doesn't have a lot of land, but they got a lot of capital. A lot of human capital, I should say. Human knowledge, human capital, meaning like machines and stuff, industrialization. And capital really is based upon the stuff that produces stuff. It's like the tractors that produce the food on the shelves. It's not really, that's what capital is. It's not the end product, it's the product before. It's a product that produces the end product, kind of. It's layered on top of itself. That's what the Austrians believe. It's a layer process. Like a bread of a sandwich is this capital to make the sandwich. The person who make the sandwich is also part of the capital. They're not, the labor and the capital itself is integral to the end product. And if you don't sell the end product, all that stuff is just wasted. It's a loss in a business or in a company or even in a government. Although governments rarely produce profits. I don't know of a single example of a government producing that much profit. There's really no incentive to. But that being said, right, the reason why I would want immigration is because I don't want to be in North Korea. I don't want to be in North Korea. I would rather be the United States. I'd rather be Brazil. I would rather be, I don't know about Brazil, but Brazil is richer than some other countries, I imagine. You look at some of the more restrictive countries in Africa, the ones that don't have immigration really that much at all. Liberia is a perfect example of a country that does not allow immigration. Especially, the Constitution actually explicitly bans white people from being citizens. I wouldn't want to live in a country like that because, in my opinion, they've basically restricted the human capital only ethnic African people. Now, I don't know if you could be African descent and move to Liberia. I'm sure you could. But if you're not African descent, I don't fit the bill. I'm less than 1%, right? African descent. So I probably wouldn't fit the bill for Liberian citizenship. And I don't think I want to be, because to be honest with you, their constitution explicitly says it's for only African descent people. Other countries are, way better, like South Africa, although nowadays they have a very corrupt socialized government. But before they were very, very corrupt, they were okay. I mean, they had apartheid. That was an issue. They need to get rid of that. But other than that, like, I did like Nelson Mandela. Don't get me wrong, but his cousins and all the f ups in his family, all his family members basically screwed up that country for a long period of time. His kids are not only his kids. The people who took control after him, they screwed up everything. His party that he run, some of his cousins are still in it, and they're just taking bribes and all this stuff. They're really corrupt people. Super corrupt government. Everyone keeps voting for them because that's really what they want. They just want to... it's the African Unity Party. How can you vote against unity? Yeah, of course the South African Unity Party is pretty cool. I like the ideal of being, having South African unity with all the different groups of people that live there. But if you're just going to take everybody's money and not worry about anybody, then you're not that nice of a person. But that being said, right? With so many countries, I would promote immigration. Richest countries in the world, even like countries like Israel, you can think of. Israel, most Israelis came from North Africa, right? Most Jewish Israelis came from North Africa. Now look at them. They're like 5 times richer than the average Palestinian, or even, I'd say 20 times wealthier than the Palestinians and 5 times richer in terms of income than Palestinians. Like there's no contest. Immigration leads to great things. These North African people are working in Israel and are producing more than the average Palestinian because they have the free capital to do it. If Palestine takes over Israel, all that capital goes away. It's brain drain. And there are people online I argue with who are like, oh no, we should deport all these Israelis. There's some radical people out there, Marxist people that say, oh, deport all the Jewish Israelis. I'm like, to myself, but wouldn't that hurt the Middle East? Israel is one of the few places where you can do business pretty freely without being persecuted. And I think that it is very important to have a country like Israel there to have the free capital to do what you want. It may not have the most free market. I'll grant you that. It might not be the most free market. They're a heavily militarized country, but there are reasons for it historically that they're militarized. And it's just I don't know. There's so many examples that I've rarely seen an example where immigrants have hurt a country that much, in my opinion. Maybe if they were taking welfare. If they're taking welfare, especially in the United States, we have a big issue with a lot of the immigrants that come here when they're young. They don't, it's not really their problem that they're here, right? The issue is we spend billions of dollars on education for them for free in high schools and middle schools, elementary schools. And I don't know if we're going to get all that tax money back from what we educated from them, but it's better to educate them and not and not deport them than deport them. Deporting them would just be worse, in my opinion. It'd probably be more wasted money. I don't know, I think you're wasting resources deporting people. So in my opinion, I don't know, we shouldn't be giving them welfare, but at the same time, they should be working, and again, our farmhand laborers are all from Mexico or different Latin American countries and stuff like that. That frees up labor for other groups of people. Now, is that bad that bomb runs of people have to do bomb jobs? Yeah, it kind of sucks, but what is the alternative? If you look at the minimum wage law in Bangladesh did this, right? And I don't think they have as much immigration as we do here. But even though it's not really the immigration, we are going to talk about it just because it's very interesting economically, right? So Bangladesh is was one of the poorest countries in that region, and so they started making textiles, and then they had a minimum wage law, which a lot of firms went under when that happened. A lot of the smaller firms going under, so all the big companies were profiting, but all the small companies failed. And then minimum wage law, of course, destroyed all the small businesses. But then they had child labor law, meaning if you're under 18, you couldn't make shirts anymore. So you either did prostitution or you starved. And I'm thinking to myself, the real minimum wage is zero. This is why we need to free up the labor. If you have a minimum wage law, if you have, you have child labor law. These children, if they don't work, they starve or do prostitution. It's pretty obvious that I would rather them be making something, making shirts for other people, even though they're probably not going to make the total amount of money that the shirt's going to be sold on the market for. I'd rather them make the shirt than for them to starve or do prostitution. Like, in my opinion, the kid working, because working in Bangladesh sucks regardless. Farming, there are reasons why people will go into horrible working conditions of the shirt factory instead of working on the farm, because the farming is actually very, very intensive on your back. Rice farming is terrible on your back. Terrible. And there's so many articles, so many people have talked about how rice farming is worse than making shirts. Making shirts, while it may not be an air-conditioned building, it is, however, a better working environment to work in than being on a farm. There's a reason why people are willing to die to work in those factories, right? Well, all of socialists are like, oh, isn't that so terrible? I'm like thinking to myself, yes, but at least they're producing the next step of their capital investment. At least they're producing the next step to become a wealthier country. They need to go through that process in order to be wealthy. If you slow down the process with minimum wage laws and child labor laws, well, now you've closed down all the smaller firms for competition, and you've also decreased the labor force, and you've basically starved out a lot of kids, and they basically did prostitution in order to survive, which is not a good thing. I cannot stress this much how bad this is. But basically, I believe they allowed immigration. They got rid of those stupid other laws, right? They would free up so much labor and then there would be so much capital pouring in. China did this, and I just think that if we got what China sort of did when they opened up some of their capital, although I'm pretty sure Bangladesh has opened up a lot more capital to textile than India, I think, because more of their economies reliant on it. That might be a big issue, actually, but regardless, it has boosted the average Bangladeshi income a lot. Wage growth was almost non-existent before the capital investment showed up. You look at the era of colonialism in Africa. The average income in Africa actually rose. Despite all the suckiness that colonialism was, they took natural resources from some of the natives. Most of the people who were just, who weren't, most of the people actually had, their incomes went up by 20%, and wage growth is almost unheard of in that area of the world, in Africa. While colonialism was terrible in some regard, and a few big companies did profit, like the East Indian Company did profit, the Cape Cod Company and the British Cape Cod Company, and there's a few of them. Company of Cape Good Hope and the Breers Company and the Rhodesian Company. All those companies made profit, but it was only a small percentage. The British Empire overall lost on it. They lost way more tax revenue than they gained from doing it. Only a handful of people actually made any profit on colonialism. Same with slavery. Slavery was not profitable for the economy at all. If you look at the slavery, again, like I feel like a lot of people who are like pro-immigrant are like, oh, isn't it terrible that we should be giving them welfare instead of them working out in the fields helping us Americans? Or like, there's some Americans are like, I'd rather have an American farmer food because I trust them more. There's these weird arguments people come up. I don't know how true any of these arguments are, but I'm just making like random straw man and seeing which ones sort of are like interesting. But like, so like people will say, oh, slavery was profitable. Well, not really. It was profitable in terms of like two maybe technologies. First off, the big battleships that transport all the people over from Africa to the Americas. Okay, that's number one. The technology of the military did improve, but other than that, technology really didn't improve that much during most of the era of slavery. And then another thing is like, the only people who really profited off of slavery were the slave owners. The slave owners didn't really trade because they didn't need to. They already had all the production for their slaves. Because they weren't trading as much, it caused the economy to slow down. And the South has always had a stagnant economy. If the South was so much more, the South of the United States, if the Confederates were so much more efficient with their labor, how come they lost the Civil War? People have never asked us. Slavery is not profitable. I'm sorry, you can't make a single case for me that slavery is profitable. Not for the vast majority anyway. It's only profitable for a handful of people. It's just like communist countries. It's profitable for Joseph Stalin and Kim Jong-un and maybe, what's the other guy's name? Xi Jinping, even though China's not really communist, they've opened up their capital markets. But again, they're service revenue codes. They're not Etsy stocks. But who cares, right? Despite all that stuff, right? Communism, socialism, slavery, they all have a handful of people profiting off of it. You don't actually own yourself in those systems. With true voluntary exchange and capitalism, you do own yourself. And when I say capitalism, I don't mean, you sell yourself to a company for 20 years, to like a military. No. Anything to do with government obviously is not capital, but also I'm thinking about just even a small little company. You don't sell yourself 20 years. Contracts should be always less than 1 year. Unless you're buying a home, which is a long-term investment, which should be a little bit regulated by government. Everything else, in my opinion, should not be really regulated by government. Government should say, okay, contracts should always be less than 1 year, because you cannot trust people. I don't trust people that go over a 1 year contract. I never will. If I was a private contractor or a corporate contractor, whatever, company contractor, I would never have a contract over a year. Okay, unless you're living in my home, maybe 2 year contracts for renters or whatever, but in my opinion, capitalism is about the voluntary transaction. That's a contract, a voluntary transaction, not forced. You pay taxes because you vote for this, this guy up here. It's a voluntary transaction because even though you didn't like the guy, you voted for it anyway. I'm like, no, that's not voluntary. I'm sorry. Just because the government votes to kick my balls does not make it voluntary. It doesn't. Just because I live in a government where I can vote for someone else to get their balls kicked does not make that voluntary whatsoever. But two people exchanging, only one person exchanging money for an apple, or an apple for a stick, or an apple for a banana, that is voluntary transaction. Now, the reason why you have currencies is to make it more efficient to trade. But that's the thing, right? It's a store of value. It's efficient. But again, that's what true capitalism is. So I believe that immigration does help capital. It does help It does help people. I don't want to be the next North Korea. I don't want to be anti-immigrant. So in my opinion, that's sort of where I draw my conclusion. North Korea is the worst country ever, hands down. I don't know if there's any other country that's worse than that. Maybe Somalia, but Somalia is an anarchy. It's not really a government anymore at this point. But anyway, that's besides the point. You're someone, I'm someone else, talking about how pro-immigrant I truly am, how free market I truly am, how liberating my ideals truly are to people. Signing out. Goodbye.